Hello everyone, this is Module 4 Part 2, and in this section of the module we'll be talking about drugs and poisons and the regulation of drugs and poisons. So first of all, we're going to talk about the control systems for drugs and poisons. So the availability of potentially dangerous drugs and chemicals needs to be restricted to ensure their safe and effective use. So the scheduling is the legal process used to achieve this. So schedules increase from 2 until 9 in increasing order of restriction. Scheduling in Australia is legally a state matter, but all states now adhere closely to or entirely to the standard for the uniform scheduling of drugs and poisons. So changes to the schedules are made by the National Drugs and Poison Schedules Committee, and these are really updated pretty much constantly. So now we have an electronic version of the poison standard, so the SUSMP, and this is regularly updated by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. And so drugs and poisons include prescription medications, pharmacy-only medications, drugs of dependence, many household, industrial and agricultural chemicals, and as well as veterinary medicines, which are only available from a veterinary practitioner. And as I said, this is the URL for the poison standard, and this is constantly updated. So I would urge people to go and have a look at this for themselves. Scheduling and principles. Toxicity is the keystone of scheduling. Medicines are inherently toxic, which will cause harm in some circumstances. Drugs should only be used when the likely benefits to be gained outweigh the possible toxic effects. This premise would not of itself require a system of scheduling, except that members of the public often do not know enough about diseases to judge whether or not to take a particular drug. They are also not sufficiently aware of the different patterns of toxicity exhibited by different medications to make this judgment. This premise does not necessarily require the exact schedules used in Australia, which are a little different from those in many other countries. In particular, Australia has separate schedules for drugs and poisons, for medications only available from a pharmacy but which can be sold from open shelves and advertised, so that's Schedule 2 or pharmacy-only drugs. Medications only sold by the pharmacists themselves and cannot be advertised except as a generic drug group, so that's Schedule 3 or pharmacist only. Medications only sold on prescription, Schedule 4 or pharmacy only once again. Most countries, however, have the equivalent of the Australian Schedule 8, which is for drugs that have legitimate therapeutic uses, but also have addictive or abuse potential and hence requires specific controls. Schedule 9 is for drugs that have no therapeutic use but are subject to abuse. Schedule 9 drugs are only available for research purposes. Schedules 5, 6 and 7 include non-therapeutic chemicals in increasing order of toxicity and thus in increasing order of restricted availability. The Commonwealth Poison Standard. The Commonwealth Poison Standard consists of the Standard for the Uniform Scheduling of Poisons and Medications, or the SUSMP. The Standard for the Uniform Scheduling of Medicines and Poisons has replaced the old SUSDP as a record of decisions regarding the classification of medicines and chemicals into schedules for inclusion in relevant legislation of the states and territories. So this includes model provisions about containers and labels and recommendations about other controls on medicines and chemicals. For the territories, the Poison Standard also includes model provisions about containers and labels, a list of products recommended to be exempt from these provisions, and recommendations about other controls on drugs and poisons. The Poison Standard has been presented with a view to promoting uniform scheduling of substances as well as uniform labelling and packaging requirements throughout Australia. The predecessor to this document, the Standard for the Uniform Scheduling of Drugs and Poisons, or the SUSDP, formed the basis of this particular standard, and the amendments are outlined in the introductory statements for the poison schedule. So more detail of the regulations and applications of the Poison Standard and other related regulation can be found at the Therapeutic Goods Administration's website. And I've put the URL to the website up there on the slide. So now just to go over the purpose of the drugs, poisons and controlled substances regulations. So just go in a little bit more detail. So the purposes are to manage licenses and permits, to limit manufacture, distribution and use, monitor labelling and packaging of drugs and poisons to the particular standards, monitor prescribing habits and dispensing procedures, monitor procedures to ensure medications administered according to prescribers' instructions, overseeing labelling packaging, so this is the TGA Labelling and Packaging Guide, licenses to manufacture, sell or supply by wholesale, licenses and permits, permits to purchase drugs and poisons for industrial use, research and provision of health services, so this again goes under licenses and permits, administration and supply of drugs by health professionals, which is a requirement for all health professionals, pharmacotherapy, so methadone and so on, so treatment under pharmacotherapy guidelines, permits to treat patients with drugs of dependence, and notification of supply of unusually large quantities of drugs for any particular individual. So in conclusion, in this module, we've examined the classification of dangerous goods and scheduled poisons and their applications and implications for workplaces and workers. It's imperative that you're able to access and interpret risk-related information to both be able to apply this to the management of dangerous goods as well as hazardous substances and to the appropriate use of expert assistance. All of which provides essential underpinning to the development, evaluation and maintenance of safe systems of work based on accurate information relating to control of dangerous goods and scheduled poisons. Now, in the next modules, we will be examining the health effects of these various substances on workers. So we've moved now beyond the legislation, looking at some of the application within workplaces. Now, just to finish up, I want to stress again how important it is that you recognise that the information provided in this module does not attempt to address the specific requirements for each individual jurisdiction, and that it's very important that you familiarise yourself with the chemical hazard management requirements for your specific jurisdiction, as well as all the related regulations specific to your particular jurisdiction. Okay, that's the end of Module 4. These are the references which I've been using to develop the material in this particular lecture. Thank you very much.